Welcome to Hidden History of Rock and Roll with your host, Tiffany Scott. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Hidden History of Rock and Roll.
Hello and welcome to Hidden History of Rock and Roll. I'm your host, Tiffany Scott, and if you are new to my podcast, I do a deep dive into the behind-the-scenes stories of rock's greatest legends, how they came to be, how the records got played, and maybe some dirty little secrets if we're lucky. This is your all-access backstage pass. Today, I get to introduce you to an industry legend. He is a 30-plus year veteran in the music industry and has so many amazing stories to tell. Please welcome to the show, Paul Rappaport, better known in the industry as Rap or Rapper. Hey, Paul, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm a big fan of your dad's.
Oh, that's great. That's great. He's a big fan of yours.
He used to make me mad because sometimes he'd have better ideas than me.
Well, that was his medicine talking, I believe.
Well, whatever it was, I'd have to say, yeah, that sounds great. Okay, we'll do that.
Okay, Paul, so you have an extensive list of artists and bands you've worked with. Allow me to just name off a few. I know I can't do this in one breath, but I'll start with Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, James Taylor, Billy Joel, the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, Elvis Costello, Aerosmith, Santana, Journey, Paul McCartney, Willie Nelson, Men at Work, Loverboy, The Psychedelic Furs, Midnight Oil, Judas Priest, Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden, Alice in Chains, and you toured with Springsteen, Billy Joel, Journey, the Rolling Stones, and Pink Floyd. That is an unbelievable resume.
Yeah, when I look back on it all, it actually honestly blows my own mind. But, you know, because it was like a lot of stuff. But Columbia is a big label. It was Columbia Records, who is my story, and most of my career is with Columbia, one label, and all those artists were on that label.
Wow!
So it was a rock and roll adventure of a lifetime. I'll tell you that flat out.
Yes, that is amazing. I mean, I can't wait to get everybody into these stories. So let's start from the beginning so that our listeners can get to know you a little better. How did you get into the music industry, and what was your first job?
I was a student at UCLA, and I was a guitar player. I've been playing guitar since 14, and so I played in bands, and I was in a fraternity. I'd play for our dances and this, that, kind of thing. And one day, I was just sitting on the steps, just checking people out walking by, and one of the fraternity brothers came by and had a little note. And he said, "Hey, listen, some guy called from a record company looking for a part-time, job person to, represent the company. And we all think that's you." All right. Cause they knew me because I used to keep them up at night with amplifiers blaring. And so it was like, I got this note. And then I called the guy who would eventually be my first boss. So I fell into it. I loved music. I never thought about being in the music industry, the business of music. Mm-hmm. I called this guy up, and he's wants to impress me, that quote unquote, I'll be working with the stars and all this kind of stuff. And I'm coming from the sort of hippie generation of, I don't know if I want to, be working for the man. It's a big corporation, Columbia.
Right.
So he's saying things to me like, "Hey, look, this is great. You get to work with all the stars." And I'm saying things to him without a filter because I'm, such an idiot. So I'm like, fuck the stars, man. I don't care about that stuff. I'm a serious blues musician. And, I love the music, and, I need to know how much time it's going to take because, I'm a student, I'm a philosophy major, and I need to know how much time it's going to be. And I can see he's kind of questioning in his head, why do I have to talk a kid into being in the music business in 1969? Like, this should be easy.
Right.
So anyway, he starts down the line. He says, hey, look, it's part-time. But there's a lot of perks. You'll make, I can't remember what it was, like $15 a week or something. I can't remember what it was. It's minor. He goes, you get all your records for free. You get a stereo. I go, whoa, wait a minute. What did you just say? Did you just say I get all my records for free? He said, yeah. It's everybody in the business. I said, but Columbia's a big label. You have Bob Dylan. You have Janis Joplin. You have Miles Davis. You telling me I get all those records for free? And he goes, yeah. He goes, and you get a camera. And you go, oh, I don't care about the camera. and all of a sudden, all my sort of hippie mentality of not working for the corporation disappeared. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm your guy. I'm coming right now. I'm going to get in my car. He goes, no, son, I'm busy. Don't come now. He goes, come in a week from now. Come Wednesday. And he thought it was kind of funny, but if you're me, and I'm a blue collar kid,
right.
Growing up, and the albums were a luxury for me. I did, when I got to college, my album collection was like maybe 6 albums.
Wow.
I mean, it was something that I didn't have an album collection. So the thought of that, it was overwhelming. And of course it came true, and I couldn't, believe it, after I got a full-time job there and was able to gratis records.
And what was your title?
I was local promotion for Los Angeles. When I graduated college, they held the job open for me in the summer. They had hired me to work in the mailroom, but I had just graduated college and the war in Vietnam was still on. And they had this lottery, and my number came up 3. So they only had to get to 4 till I was going to go to war. And it was difficult for me to make a decision not to go, but because I'm not a conscientious objector, I knew if push comes to shove and somebody, comes after us in this country, I'm going to pick up a gun. So I couldn't tell a judge that, but I wasn't a fan of that war at all. And it was becoming this big, horrible thing, and kids were dying for no reason. And
wow.
So it's a long story about how I didn't go, but I wound up getting out of it. And Columbia had liked me. They had gotten to know me as a college rep, and they held the job open for me. And so then I took my boss's job. He went to Warner Brothers. He was the local album guy. Mm-hmm. In those days, there was a head of album promotion and a head of top 40 promotion. And we promoted all formats. So I went to not only the rock stations, the FM stations, but the classical stations, the easy listening stations, the country stations.
Wow. So you had a lot.
Et cetera. Yeah. So, just a word on being able to order as many, record albums as you can. Plus, in the business, we all shared records with different labels, so you could pretty much get anything you want. So when I was first able to order records from Columbia, I'm a rock fan, but I like cool jazz. I love Miles Davis. Well, at the time, Miles Davis had 36 albums on Columbia Records. So I take this form, fill it out. I put everyone down. And I think this is a joke. Like, there's no way they're going to send me Miles Davis albums. Let's just see what happens. It's an experiment. 2 weeks later, I come home to my apartment, which is at the foot of Laurel Canyon. And there's all these boxes, and I'm thinking, what are all these boxes? I didn't order anything. Maybe it's for the guy downstairs. And I look closer, and it says record albums. Mm. And I bring them in my house, and lo and behold, I open them up, and there are 36 Miles Davis albums.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there like a kid in a candy store in the middle of my living room floor, surrounded by some of the greatest, album artwork ever, thinking, oh my God, I'm in heaven. A few years later, when I wound up getting married, believe it or not, I had amassed 10,000 albums.
Are you kidding me?
No, they were all, I had no furniture. I just had a stereo.
You can always use the boxes.
Oh no, they were all over, they were in shelves all over the the living room, down the hallway, in the bathroom, in the spare room. And the funniest part was when I went to Mary Sharon, she said, why don't we get like a kitchen table and chairs? That would be helpful.
That'll be your show.
Right. And of course you can't listen to all those records. So over time I would give them to friends and family and whatever, but it was, it was an amazing time.
Yeah, that was incredible. Wow. I remember those days as a kid myself. So you have worked with so many incredible artists. I know you have a really great story about Tony Bennett, and I'd love to hear how he got you to stay in the music industry.
Yeah, it's a real heartwarming story. As I said, because we promoted all formats, I also went to easy listening stations and promoted Tony Bennett. And, but even before that, and I think it was towards the end of my college rep career, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be in the music business, because at that time, a lot of the people that ran the business were, men from the 1950s. It's kind of like the Hey Babe era, right? I'm coming now from this new generation of hippie freaks. But, the 60s generation is quite different. And those people were fine. They just were different than us. They had a different way of talking to people. We were more genuine folks. And so, a promotion man might be heard saying, going to promote something at a radio station, they might walk in and say, yeah, there's not a bad track on the album. And that's something a promo person might say, but I would never say that. And so some of the people I were meeting were kind of disingenuous. It was just kind of fake and Hollywood, and I didn't know if I could be that. So I was at a big party for Tony Bennett. It was a hotel suite that he was in, and it was for a new album of his coming out. And what was interesting was at the time, there were a lot of people that we all know from the industry who were there. One of them was Russ Thyrett, who went on to run Warner Brothers, but at that time he's just a kid, right? Russ Solomon was there talking about opening up a new kind of store called Tower Records. Wow. Which opened later that year. Yeah, these are the people. So it was a big, raucous party. People are dancing and everything. But I just felt that it was like a fake Hollywood party. Like, I don't think they were really there for Tony. I thought they're just here because it's a Hollywood party. They're, and I didn't like it. And I waited for everybody to leave. And, I walked up to him. I said, hey, Mr. Bennett, do you mind? I said, I'm a college rep for Columbia. I'm looking to get a real job, but I just really need to talk to you. And at the time, he was in his sort of ascot pipe phase. He got a lot cooler when he started with the Chili Peppers. But at that time, that's how he was. Mm-hmm. And so I was expecting him to talk to me in these, old English parables or some great vocabulary or whatever. And I had no filter then. And I just said, look, God, I got this party. It just seems so fake. It just seems so bullshit. I said, I don't even think half the people here have even heard your new record, which, by the way, is a really cool record. I just think they were here to drink your booze and eat your food. And I the people that I'm meeting in the business, sometimes they're just kind of fake. And I don't know if I can be that. Mm-hmm. I just don't know if I can make it in this business because I love the music, but I just don't know if I can be that. And he looked down at me and he goes, Paul, sometimes things can be pretty fucked up.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, this guy's so cool. It was so down to earth. He wasn't like, oh, I'm Mr. Tony Bennett, And he said, look, let me tell you a story. Because what he wanted to tell me was, yeah, there's a lot of that. He goes, but there's a lot of good stuff too. He goes, let me tell you a story. He said, I was a superstar for the longest time. So after I recorded I Left My Heart in San Francisco, I became a world citizen. I mean, wherever I went, it was unbelievable. He said, but then the music changed and I found myself a little out of favor with the kind of music I do. I'm a jazz singer. And he said, I went to talk to my friend, Duke Ellington. And I said, Duke, I don't know what to do. Maybe I should change or try to remake myself. And Duke looked at me and he said, Tony, he said, you are an apple. You're the greatest Tony Bennett apple we have. Do not try to change yourself into an orange. He goes, first of all, you won't be able to do it. It won't work for you. And you are so great as you are. It's just sometimes the world is fickle. He said, just remain who you are and you'll see, the world will come back to you, for the kind of music you do. You don't have to change. You just be you. And then he looked at me and he said, Paul, I'm going to tell you the same thing, give you the same advice. You look like a really smart guy. You love music. That's the most important thing. You don't have to be that way. You don't have to be duplicitous. You just be you. You just be your genuine self. You'll find your way. You'll do it your way. And it just took a load off me. I was like, wow. Like the guy gave me permission to be myself, in a business that was at the time full of different kinds of folks than me. And I'll never forget, because when I left that hotel room, I saw my future. I was like, oh, I can do this. I'll do this.
And it also
so that was a big, big moment in my life.
It also came from a legend.
Yeah, and it didn't hurt that it was from him, because that guy had been around the block 3 times, right? He'd seen it all, done it all. And then later on, he and I became friends, and I worked with him, and we wound up creating a television show together, which is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, we can come back to that.
Yeah, he was an amazing person, and I would just say this: he had a work ethic. I wished I could take all the rock and roll bands I worked with and put them on the road with Tony for a week and go, this is how you do it. No bullshit, no attitude. You show up to rehearsal early, you get things done. There's a reason why he lasted as long as he did, and had a rebirth in his career.
Yeah, that is an incredible story.
Yeah, wonderful human being.
I know you also had shared with me a Bob Dylan story that I'm really excited for you to share with listeners.
Yeah, Bob Dylan for me, I guess there's 2 of my favorite artists, or the ones that meant the most to me, or have meant the most to me, are Bob Dylan and Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones. Bob, because of the folk movement, which was so big, and him writing songs like, Blowing in the Wind, these classic songs, and him sort of striking out and being a very different kind of singer-songwriter and showing the world that the world could be different, right? Showed me that I could fit into the world, because when I was growing up, I didn't know if I could fit in the world. I was just kind of different as a kid growing up. Other kids were out playing baseball, and I had a laboratory in my bedroom where I was making rocket fuel and shooting rockets up. And then I learned how to play guitar. So I was different, and just listening to him, it was kind of like, oh, this guy's showing what he showed a whole generation, how to be different. So he meant a lot to me. And I learned how to play, electric guitar, listening to Rolling Stones album, listening to Keith Richards, going, how's he doing that? So when I first met Bob, it was very intimidating, which is for everybody who meets him, because it's Bob Dylan.
Right.
So, when you first meet Bob, when I first met him, he said, the problem with me is when people meet me, they think they're meeting the lyrics. He goes, I know these songs are heavy. I know how heavy they are. I wrote them. He said, but those are songs. I'm me, right? But you can't help it, because all of these songs are so amazing that are in your head. When you sit down in front of the guy, you can't help it. You're just intimidated. You are meeting the lyrics. So it took me like 5 meetings with him to get over it, because I'd be talking to him, and then every 30 seconds I'd look at him and I'd go, shit, you're talking about Dylan. And then I'd have to shake my head and go back and become a professional record guy and go, yeah, Bob. So, but eventually we did, and I had a wonderful relationship with him, which was a real big deal to me, because of who he was, and so I was able to give back. Like, I could help him promote his career and help him in ways that he couldn't help himself. Mm-hmm. It was a real big deal. I'll tell you one interesting story before I tell you the one you want to hear. One of the things that I did is I talked him into doing an interview. Well, I didn't talk him into it. I can't talk him into anything. A record would come out, I'd call him up and list 20 ideas, and he never wanted to do any of them. He just didn't like to promote himself that way. But he did agree to do one interview. He hadn't done an interview for radio in years. And he said, well, I'll do that. And I said, fine. I go, who do you want to do it with? And he said, Dave Herman, who was the morning show guy from NEW. And I said, okay. So I thought it would happen in New York because Bob's in New York and Dave's in New York. But the way things are in this business, I got a call from management that said, yeah, Bob's going to do the interview and we're going to do it in London.
Oh.
It's like, sure. Okay. It's, why couldn't it have been easy? But it wasn't.
Right.
Anyway, so I fly over to London with Dave, and his manager at the time was a friend of mine, and we fly on the Concorde, which is a whole nother story. And anyway, Bob does the interview with Dave there after he performed in London, which if Bob Dylan was big in America, he's like a god in London. Like when he performs, all of rock royalty shows up. He is that.
Wow.
So I sent him, I said, here, I put Dave in a room with Bob, and David had a tape recorder, and I didn't want to be there to mix anything up. And so then when I got the tape back, two things happened. First thing that happened was I told David, because at the time Bob was going through his Christian phase. He had a phase where he purportedly was a born again Christian, but he was getting into Christianity, or at least exploring that area. And I told Dave, look, I'm really promoting his music. I don't want to talk about this. I don't really want it in the interview. If he mentions it, fine, but I don't want you to necessarily bring it up. And of course, the first thing that I get the tape back, first thing on it is Dave asking Bob about Christianity.
Oh, no.
But that's 20 minutes about the beasts in the Bible. And I'm like, oh, God, you're killing me. But then he gets on to music and whatever. But the interesting thing was that Bob decided to play his guitar in the background, strumming chords throughout the interview. And I thought it was fascinating, and it added texture. But no one ever did that before. So I called him and I said, Bob, I really need to ask you this. I go, it makes it, much harder to obviously edit this interview. I said, but why did you do that? And he said, exactly for the reason you just mentioned. He says, this is a trick that I learned from Mary Travers from Peter, Paul, and Mary. He said, back in the folk days, when we were writing all the protest songs and the government was after us, Mary told me, if you ever do an interview, play guitar behind your speaking, because no one can edit what you say to sound like you've said something else.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Because as soon as you hear the music edit, you know that the tape's been messed with.
Wow. Blew
my mind.
That just blew my mind.
Right. Old school street smarts. I just thought it was so amazing. But I had a great time working with him and getting to know him. And like a lot of artists, they're into what they're into. I'd want to talk about making a video, and he'd say, you have to get into these Russian poets. I just came back from Russia. They gave me a medal because of my poetry. And I'm reading all these Russian poets, and you need to read about these Russian poets. And I was like, Bob, we have to talk about your video. But yes, the most extraordinary thing that ever happened, and this is well documented, Bob eventually, after writing 700 songs, or how many songs he wrote, around the mid 80s, had a writing block. And so I get a phone call from him, and I say, hey, Bob, how you doing? And he talks to that Bob Dylan voice, I was like, hey man, I don't know. I think I'm going to quit. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, I don't think people want to hear my shit anymore. I'm like, Bob, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, I think I'm just going to stop. And I was like blown away, first of all, that he would call and tell me something like that.
And wait, what year was this?
I'm not good with time. I want to say 1986-ish. I'd have to look it up.
Okay.
Because he went on to work with his friend who produced a couple of, they did cover albums of folk songs, where Bob plays extraordinary guitar, but he was having trouble, imagine writing the songs that guy writes, and that's the level he has to write on. If he doesn't, he's not satisfied.
Right. So
I just said, Bob, I said, first of all, you can't quit. It's not a job. Like you are, like you're Bob Dylan. You can't stop being Bob Dylan.
Wow.
I said, do you realize how many amazing songs you've written? I go, your brain's just tired. It's like anybody goes through a writing block, you especially, maybe your brain's just going, hey, just give me a break.
Right.
I said, but you don't have a choice. You're Bob Dylan. It's, you can't. So I spent an hour talking to him.
Wow.
And I'd like to think that I helped him.
Right.
But it's a story nobody knows. And it's a story worth telling, not to embarrass him for any reason, but people should know that even the great Bob Dylan, right, goes through stuff in life.
Right.
Right. It's, these guys, and girls, they, everybody has their stuff they go through. So, but I think that was the most extraordinary conversation. Yeah,
between Tony Bennett and Bob Dylan, the two great artists, they go through things.
Yeah, they do. They all do. And everybody thinks these people have the world by the tail, but
sometimes
they don't. Yeah, it's hard.
I would love to talk about your time with Pink Floyd because I'm a huge Pink Floyd fan. And I really want to know if there's some hidden history that you can tell about your time with the band.
Interesting. Hidden history. Let me think on that for a second. There's a lot of hidden history. I'm curious, you're a big fan of, so what album, I just want to know from you, I'm just curious, what album turned you on to Pink Floyd, or did you go see them live, or maybe you don't remember?
No, I do. I think Pink Floyd, the movie, was a big deal. And it was like everyone wanted to do LSD or mushrooms and experience Pink Floyd.
Right.
And that was a big deal at the time. So I never did LSD, and then I just loved them ever since. I was too afraid to get deep, but
the most amazing thing about Pink Floyd, and some people may not realize it, or someone like yourself may not realize because you're younger, but the most amazing thing about Pink Floyd is when you saw them live, all of their effects, which they're a very big, it's like a show. So it's the music, but there are these animated movies that are showing on a screen. There's pyrotechnics, there's lasers. It's a multi-dimensional experience. But what's very important to remember about them is that all of their music was in sync to all these effects. So they would play the same show every night, and the drummer, Nick Mason, had what's called a click track in his ear on headphones so that he would know when to start the music. And so like if there was a big crescendo in the music, all of a sudden you see an array of lasers. Or if there's a big, something happening in the music, there's this happening, there's that happening. The movies were all timed to the music. So it was a psychedelic experience. Like whether you took LSD or got high or, on marijuana or whatever, you didn't have to do anything. You just sat there because it was the music and the sounds. They had quadraphonic sound. Wow. So even if you were like at the Hollywood Bowl, you're hearing like these noises that are on the albums behind you. Like you're hearing dogs, behind you, and all these sounds, and the music is quadraphonic, and the experience, the lights and the sound and the music creates this sort of universal wow. They certainly were big on that on their albums. You hear all the sound effects of elevators and everything, because they made psychedelic albums. I mean, that's what they did. So it's important to mention that because I think sometimes people forget how that experience was. So anyway, so again, they were a big influence on me because I had heard their music early on, not as early as Bob Dylan or the Rolling Stones, but when they were on Capitol Records, and they had just done The Dark Side of the Moon, but it hadn't been released yet, and they were only selling like a couple 100,000 albums, per maybe 300,000 at the most. They were sort of an underground band, and the manager wasn't happy with Capitol because he thought the band could do much more, and Capitol just sort of, didn't blow them off, but they just sort of recognized them as only that. And so I think when their contract was up, and he came to Columbia and talked to Clive Davis and signed the band to Columbia. Now, Dark Side of the Moon hits, and that's one of the, greatest albums ever made. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden Capitol's like going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And, calls Pink Floyd and says, hey, we got to renew our contract. Steve O'Rourke says, oh, too late. Wow. So I worked with them from Wish You Were Here on throughout my career, at Columbia.
Wow.
So when I met them, first time I met them, I think they were in LA, probably on a promo tour for Wish You Were Here. And they were very low-key, quiet Englishmen. So much so that I couldn't believe it was them. Like, I was like, are you the guys that made Dark Silent? Right?
Right.
But they're not, when you see Pink Floyd, they're not rock star. They don't run around the stage. They stand there and play. That's what they do. So I think I was a regional album promotion man at the time for Western region. I've been promoted from local to regional, and everybody, at that time, everybody had album rock specialty regional people because the FM radio had become so big. And I asked them, I said, you guys don't do any interviews. Do you not do them for some mystique reason? I said, because all of us actually think you guys are aliens that came from another planet who are making this kind of music. And they laughed. And Roger, Waters said, no, we don't do interviews because nobody knows how to talk to us. They just want to know what kind of underwear we're wearing. And we don't, what shirts are we? We don't care about that. And I said, well, if I brought you to someone who knew your music and would talk to you about your music, would you be interviewed by that person? And they said, yes. And I said, great, I'm going to bring you to a good friend of mine by the name of Jim Ladd. Mm. And Jim Ladd, God bless him, he's no longer with us, but he and I were friends for many years. Mm. And he was, in my mind, he's the greatest FM disc jockey ever. I guess two of them, maybe him and Stephen Clean, if anybody remembers Stephen Clean, are my two favorites. But Ladd at the time had a show called Interview. Mm. And he had a remarkable home up in the Laurel Canyon. And to get to his home, you pulled to a dead-end street, and there was a tram that went up a hill. You had to get on a tram to go up a hill to his house, which was perched on a ledge of Laurel Canyon.
I've seen it.
Yeah, so I took the guys, put them on the tram. They're looking at me going, oh, man, this guy must be really cool. And I go, oh, yeah. I go, he is the coolest. So they went and they hit it off. They loved each other because they'd never really met anybody like Jim. England didn't have FM radio like we had. And Jim was so steeped in their music. And Jim wound up being a really close friend of Roger's. Mm. And I got to know them and became friends with them. Roger Waters taught me how to play cricket. In a match that it was Pink Floyd versus EMI, which is their label in Europe. Wow. But there's an EMI, of course, in America. And so they had a cricket match and they said, do you want to play cricket? And I was like, sure. I didn't know anything about it.
That's great.
So anyway, they taught me how to play cricket. And that was a lot of fun. And I worked with them through a couple, a few years. And then, there was a big creative fallout between Roger and the rest of the band. And Roger decided to leave the band. Mm. And it was very divisive and really awful. He thought the band wouldn't continue without him because he had become such a big part of the band. I mean, the wall was so much about him that they said, well, can we keep the name? And he said, yeah, I don't care. He said, but I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to kind of go on my own. So he was shocked when they decided to remain Pink Floyd without him. He never thought that could happen. Mm. It was very sad. And I was caught right in the middle because, now at this time I've gone from regional, I've been promoted. Now came to New York to run the rock department for Columbia in 1980, 1981. I ran their rock department for 10 years. And so now I'm in charge of promoting these albums. I have to promote Roger's albums, and I have to promote Pink Floyd's album as Pink Floyd. And I'm caught right in the middle because they're in my ear. And Roger's going, what are they doing? What are they doing? And the guys are going, what is he doing? And I'm like, look, guys, I'm a professional. I love all of you. I'm going to work 110% for each of you, but this is your fight. I'm not getting in the middle. Whatever you tell me stays with me. Whatever they tell me stays with me. I'm not, telling any tales out of school. And that worked well. I can tell you that when Roger went on tour for one of his albums called Radio Chaos, Jim Ladd was on that album, and Jim Ladd went on tour with Roger because on that album there is a disc jockey, and the disc jockey is played by Jim Ladd. And Jim went on tour to play the disc jockey.
Oh, wow.
So I went down to see a rehearsal of the show. It was going to be on, I think it was the day before it was going to run. And it was in a small town in the Northeast, but it was, they do these things that start in small places. So I went to the rehearsal. Well, at the time, rock radio was changing. There were a lot of consultants. Jim Ladd was used to having freeform radio where you could play whatever you wanted. He was rebelling against, the consultants, and he was rebelling against this new form of radio, which was more like, hit rock format. And in this show, there's a ticker tape that goes across the top of the stage. And Ladd was so infuriated by what radio was becoming, he wrote all this seditious language about rock radio on the ticker tape. Wow. And the consultants are killing radio, and if you hate your radio station, applaud or whatever. He had written all this terrible stuff. And when I saw it rolling across the ticker tape, I was like, oh my God. I was like, we can't. Wow. I mean, every rock station is going to go see this show. It's a big show. If people see this, they're going to drop Roger's record. They're never going to want to talk to him again. Right. So I had to run back immediately. I ran backstage. I was like, Roger, you and I have to have a talk. I go, man, it's lucky I'm here. Do you know what's going on? And he goes, well, I know Ladd put some stuff up there. I said, oh, you can't run this the way it is. And I said, look, it's your show and you're Roger Waters and you're the artist. I said, but I can't, I'm telling you, you're gonna kill yourself if you do this. So, I went back and he organized a meeting. It was like a trial. The band and he were on one side of the room and I was on the other.
Right.
And I was just trying to make my case. And of course he was trying to, he wanted to be the hero to his band, and he stood up and said, we're artists and we have to say what we have to say. And I said, look, I know that. I'm like one of your biggest fans. I said, I just want to have you say it in a way where you don't make people mad. I just said, we can make the point, but the way it's written, it's going to make people mad. I don't want people to be mad at you. I want them to understand what you're trying to say.
Right.
And if you make people mad, you make, the radio stations mad. It's not going to be helpful to your cause. So he says what he has to say, and then the sax player stands up. He was 2 sheets to the wind, and he says, yeah, we're artists. And he leaps up, grabs a chandelier, swings across over my head, and lands on a table of a pile of food, and immediately passes out.
Oh my God.
Which gave everybody a chuckle, which thank God broke the ice.
Wow.
That guy, by the way, was never seen or heard of again. He didn't make the tour. I guess they got somebody else to replace him.
Man.
Anyway, so I made my point.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay, so but you said you have to work it out with Ladd. And it was rough because I love Jim Ladd. I mean, he and I were like brothers. And I said, look, Ladd, I understand. I understand, how you feel. I said, let's just go through all the things you've written and let me just try to help just sand it down a little bit. And it was hard. We stayed up all night. There were some things he wouldn't budge on. There were other things that he would say, okay, I can make that this. I said, look, just say some consultants. Just don't say all consultants, like that. And we worked till the morning. I mean, I walked out of his room, the sun had come up. but the show was much better for it. I know Roger appreciated it.
And how was it received? How was the show received?
Well, it was very interesting. The show was fantastic. The problem was that not a lot of people knew who Roger was. When he came out with the solo record, he said, Roger, you have to let us put Roger Waters from Pink Floyd, or Roger Waters, the voice of Pink Floyd. He said, you're a faceless band. Maybe 300,000 people know you. I'm one of those people because I'm interested enough to know the members. Everybody else just knows Pink Floyd. You don't really have a front man. You're playing behind all these effects. But he was so mad at the time, he didn't want anything to do with the name. Finally, because what would happen, he would book arenas, but only maybe 3,000 people would show up. And across the street at the exact same time, to add insult to injury, Pink Floyd is playing, selling out 2 stadiums.
Oh my gosh.
And I had to console him. I'd say, Roger, look, you have to understand something. In reality, you just sold out 2 stadiums and 3,000 people in this arena. He said, they don't know you're not there.
Wow.
It's Pink Floyd. It's what you helped build. I said, but it took him a long time to work his way back. It really was interesting and fascinating to watch him play these smaller shows, not have the money to do the big productions he wanted, because I knew he wanted to do it. And I give the guy credit for working his way back up to now he tours the wall and he sells out arenas again. But it took him a long time. Meanwhile, Pink Floyd did quite well. But I'll give, I can't say that his politics and mine are always the same, because we really, have different views on a lot of major things. I don't want to go into it because this is not about politics. But I take my hat off to him for reinventing himself and bringing himself back. So in the meantime, I was working with, Dave and Nick as Pink Floyd and Rick Wright. And they carried on and they did quite well. So we were doing the album, The Momentary Lapse of Reason. And that was a tour. That was the first tour without Roger. And it was going to be interesting because no one knew, would it sell out? Indeed, how many people would not come if Roger wasn't in the band? And everybody was on pins and needles. But as it turned out, it was like I'd said, people knew the brand. They knew Pink Floyd.
That was an incredible album.
Yes, no, it really was. And so I helped them through that time. I also talked them into doing interviews at meeting radio people. They'd never met anybody because they didn't have to. They were so big. They just were this mysterious. So I talked them into meeting people, which sort of really helped their album stay on the airwaves for months and months longer, just because people felt they got to know them. And all of a sudden I get a call at the end of that. It wasn't the end of the tour, it was the end of the tour in the Gates. And I call from the manager, Steve O'Rourke, and he goes, look, the band really, you guys are really good friends now. And the band really wants to thank you for all you've done for all the years. And especially on this tour, we want to get you a Christmas present. What do you want? Wow. I was like, Steve, what do I want? I don't want things. You can't call up somebody and say, we want to give you a present. What do you want? I said, thank you is fine. Anyway, I used to talk to Gilmore about guitars and all this stuff. And my secretary at the time called O'Rourke and said, oh, I know what he'd like. So I get a call in January and he says, we figured out your Christmas present when Christmas was over. Very much Christmas present. I said, well, what is it? He said, you have one song live with Pink Floyd. The band wants you to come and play one song with them live.
Whoa.
And I said, oh, you mean like in rehearsal? And he said, no, at a proper gig. I said, you mean me on stage? I said, Steve, I'm a real guitar player. I don't want to go up there and pose. I'm not, I don't want to pose like I'm a player. He goes, yeah, Gilmore knows that. He goes, that's why he's inviting you.
Wow.
I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And he said, no. So, I called Dave and I was like, geez, I can't thank you. I'm blown away. Thank you very much. And I said, well, what song should I learn? Because I don't want to, mess you guys up. He said, you should play the encore. goes, we do a song, we do Run Like Hell. He goes, come and play the encore because it's our last song and all the buttons are pushed and all the bombs are going off and the robots are going up and down and it'll be a lot of fun. You'll have a great time, blah, blah, blah. So I literally got a hold of a Pink Floyd cover band guitar player because some of those chords are very unique because they play a lot of strange chords. And I learned the song. And then, Sharon and I flew to England. They were playing 6 nights at the London Arena. It's also called the Docklands. And, we got to tell you, it was like, the experience of a lifetime.
That's incredible.
Obviously I was nervous, but I learned the song really well. And, all of a sudden I'm on stage playing Run Like Hell with Pink Floyd. So for I don't know how long that song is, 6 minutes and whatever seconds.
Did you need anything to relax?
I was in Pink Floyd. The funniest thing was they had they either had a tradition or a ritual, but for the encore backstage, waiting on the steps to go up, a guy would come out with a tray full of port wine because an opera singer had told David that it's good to gargle with port wine for your throat. Of course they gargle with it and then they drink it. And this guy shows up and they're all very English, very proper. And the guy looks at me and goes, would you like a glass of port? I was like, yeah, give me that. It's like shock. Do you have another one? Because obviously I was nervous. But, I got up there and it's a long story, but I played the song really well, and in the middle of it, there's a breakdown, and David comes walking back to me and looks at me and wiggles his finger like he does a little guitar lick and wiggles his finger like he wants me to answer. So I play guitar lick, and the next thing I know, this is even getting better than I thought. Now I'm trading licks with David Gilmour on stage in front of 15,000 kids.
Oh my God.
With lights and lasers and it was absolutely mind-blowing experience. Best guitar sound I ever had because I plugged into his rig, so I sounded like him. His sound,
of course.
And it was great. And of course, I wanted to play well for the band because if you hit a clan, the kids wouldn't know you're on a big echo loop anyway. But when I got done and people were leaving, I got to take a bow. It was the last song. It was hysterical. I'm now on stage taking bows with David Gilmour and Nick Mason, throwing picks into the audience, going, "Yeah, see you next time."
That's awesome. That is.
Yeah, it was tremendous. And the best thing was when I walked off stage, one of their keyboard players, John Caron, who was a friend of mine, looked at me and gave me a thumbs up, like, "Hey, you nailed it. You did a good job.
You nailed it."
And then that meant a lot to me because when you're playing with artists on that level, you're playing for them. You realize who you're playing with. You got to up your game. You better be really good.
Yeah, you better be ready.
So that was fantastic. Lastly, I can tell you that after I was done with promotion, I was promoted to a creative marketing position at Columbia, where I did a lot of big stunts, a lot of big events. And the Division Bell album was coming out. And I wanted to do something really, really special and big. I wanted the whole world to know that Pink Floyd was coming. So I was in my office overlooking the Hudson River, and I saw the Budweiser blimp fly by. And I went, oh my God, they do inflatables. They float pigs and things. I went, oh my God, let's create an airship for Pink Floyd. And I called Storm Thorgerson, who is their graphics designer, who's done all the album covers. In fact, people should know who Storm Thorgerson is. He's probably designed 80% of the albums that you have in your collection.
Wow.
Not just for Pink Floyd, but for Led Zeppelin, and he's a genius.
Wow.
He would take pictures. He would create events and then take pictures of them. So if you say, for instance, Houses of the Holy, that's not done on a computer. Those are real kids in outfits climbing a real mountain in Ireland somewhere.
You're kidding.
No.
Wow.
If you look at the Momentary Lapse of Reason album cover, right?
Uh-huh.
You'll see 700 beds on a beach.
Right.
It's not like there's 3 of them and the rest is CGI. There are 700 beds on a beach that
Holy
they
cow.
put. Yeah. And if you notice the cover, it looks a little wet because the day before it rained and they had to kill the chute and they had to pull 700 beds off the beach and the next day put them back on the beach.
Whoa.
So
That is
this is
something
Storm.
I did not know. That is incredible.
Yeah. So this is Storm. This is Storm Thorgerson. He's just a genius. You know, I had to talk the record company president into it because it was a lot of money. We already, you know, when you promote Pink Floyd, you're already spending a lot of money, and this was going to cost $750,000 more to you rent an airship and you paint it and you have a program for 3 months with it is the way that works. And, so Donnie Eider was the president. He'd see me in the hall and he knew what I was thinking. And he'd look at me from down the hall. He goes, "I don't want an airship. I don't need an airship." And then he'd run the other way. And finally, the manager of Pink Floyd, Steve O'Rourke, said, "Oh my God, the band loves this idea. We have to do it." And I said, "Well, it costs $1 million. I've talked the guy down to $750,000, but it's still $750,000. So the band paid for part, we paid for part, and Michael Cole, the national promoter, said, "I'll pay for part if you fly the thing up here in Canada, where I'm out of, and we can help sell tickets in Canada." So, the thing. So Storm created this beautiful, airship, which at first he said, I don't do airships. I do album covers. I said, "Well, Stormy, you're going to do this one." I said, "What's the worst that'll happen? You'll fuck it up." "Well, we paid it." So he laughed, and he did it. I'll send you a photo of it. It was spectacular. It flew all over the country. It gave kids rides. You could win a ride at a local record store. All the FM radio stations were their morning shows broadcast live from the gondola.
Oh my
So,
God.
if you were in Chicago, you'd hear Lynn Bremer and XRT going, "Hi, we're live from the Pink Floyd airship this morning, and around noon we'll be flying by the Sears Tower. So if you want to see us, wave to us. We'll wave back."
Whoa.
It was really unbelievable. It got TV coverage, press coverage. It was it became the biggest rock promotion stunt, if you will, or event marketing thing in the history of, I guess, rock, because nobody's done anything near to that. The band loved it because they all became pilots, by the way, if you want to know hidden secrets.
Yes.
Yeah, they all became pilots. So they wanted to log time in an airship. So they were calling the manager, going, "You got to get this done.
Yeah.
We want to fly the airship." So.
Oh, how incredible.
So that was, those were the days when the record business had a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the last big expenditures, which happened in 1994. And then we had a big Aerosmith party, which is a whole nother story, which cost something like, $400,000. And then after that, the valves got shut off and it became way more of a business. So.
Yeah, I can't wait to continue the stories where you are going to come back for another segment or two, I'm hoping. And that, leads me to the next thing I want to talk about is your book that you are working on. And
yes.
That's keeping you very busy, I'm assuming.
It is. It's quite a long journey. It took me, believe it or not, 5 years to write it. And that's getting up every morning, drinking coffee and writing. And some days you could write 3 hours, some days you could write 6 hours. Mm-hmm. I guess 1 year that is partial editing. But I tried to capture the whole scene from the late 60s through the 80s and into the 90s. Sort of covering everything, how radio was, certainly my journey in the business and working with all these artists. So you get to meet all these artists, and because the book is written in a you or their style, and I'm blessed with a photographic memory, you're privy to conversations like the ones I told you with Bob and, Paul McCartney and the Rolling Stones and Pink Floyd.
Mm-hmm. You're a great storyteller.
So you get to hear all these stories, and a lot of them are like ones I've told you. And you learn some inside stories. There's some promotion secrets that I've never revealed before that no one knows to this day, how certain things happened. How a new artist could somehow go from 22 to number 1 on the charts. These kind of things are in there. And so it's, I just read it because I didn't want this time to be forgotten. It's a magical era. I didn't want, there's a lot of people from behind the scenes, managers, certain record company personnel who are very colorful people, and I didn't want them to be forgotten.
Right.
So that's why the book's written, just to capture it all.
Leading into the next question, how does the industry compare from when you were active in the industry to how it is today?
Well, it was a very different business then. Because the music came first, and the money came second. The money was a result of good art, great art. We were told to be creative. They gave us money, for things like a Pink Floyd airship. Or I once shot a laser beam off Signal Hill in LA. I was an argon laser cannon. It shot for 30 miles, all the way from Long Beach. It was on Signal Hill, so you could see it all the way from Long Beach to Pasadena. People thought aliens had landed. And it did a light show for the city of Orange County and Long Beach to at the time, the new Blue Oyster Cult album that had Don't Fear the Reaper on it. So, we had money for that. I mean, records were made when bands played together in a studio as an ensemble. So the great albums you hear are great because you're hearing a band play together. Right? Playing off each other, listening to each other's riffs. That's the magic. That's why all this music is still popular today, because it was the way it was recorded. It was recorded with the greatest producers in the greatest, recording studios built with no expenses spared to get the greatest sound. Somewhere in the 90s, sadly, the music business became the money business. And, everything was about the money first. And the music, I believe in my heart of hearts, has suffered. Everything became pop. So, record companies didn't want to take time to develop people like a Bruce Springsteen anymore. That, artists take a long time to develop. But when Billy Joel and Bruce, these people start out, they don't sell a lot of records first couple of albums. Sometimes 3. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 albums for them to break big. But with pop, if you have a hit record, you sell a couple million records and you just go on to the next artist. So I'm very sad, actually, about the business because it's lost that sort of specialness. Now music is made with 4 producers and songs are written by 4 producers and everybody lays down their track. And it's not that it's not good. It's good in its own way. I mean, some of my favorite songs are some of these, latest pop songs. They're it's its own art form, but it can only go so far. If you put a drum loop down, it's not human. And so a lot of these songs don't stay in people's hearts. And I think that's why country's doing so well, because I think they still write songs traditionally that you can carry for a long time. I know Taylor Swift, very popular. She writes songs that speak to young women, but even she, because she's trying to be hip, some of her songs will have a drum loop in it because somebody thinks it's hip. And I'm like, why are you putting a drum loop in here? It's killing the vibe, it's just very different. And it's more money driven. And so the whole scene has changed. I mean, when you talk about art, right? So all of a sudden there's music being made in the 60s that's different. All of a sudden, from the hippie culture comes, Pickett, the Grateful Dead, whatever. In England, Eric Clapton is becoming a guitar virtuoso because he's listening to black blues musicians. And so is Jimmy Page, and so is Jeff Beck, and then all of a sudden there's Led Zeppelin. And all of a sudden there's Fleetwood Mac because Peter Green, who's a blues guitar player, decides he's going to have his own band. And the music all happens organically, and bands happen organically. And then one artist works with another artist. All of a sudden you get cross-pollination. All of a sudden you get traffic. All of a sudden you get the Rolling Stones are going from a pop band to a more stretched out musical band. All of a sudden Pink Floyd can have a place because there's room for experimental music. Then all of a sudden FM radio happens because there has to be a place for this music to be heard. Now there's a giant generation of people, the baby boom generation, just waiting for this music. So all these new record stores pop up because somebody, it's this explosion of music and albums and record stores, and very magical time, all organic from the 60s, 70s, 80s. Plus the music is very meaningful because you're talking about a time of social upheaval, civil rights, women's rights, war in Vietnam. All of this is written about, right? This is what's shaping me growing up, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Four Dead in Ohio. It's like all of these things, Street Fighting Man, all of these things are shaping our lives. So, now the music's different. I think our culture is a little more vapid. We're just not as deep as we used to be. So it's just very different, but I just know that it's much more bottom line than it was. No one is going to pay for $1 million airship in today's music business.
Definitely not.
It's not going to happen.
So who do you listen to today in the newer age of music?
I don't listen that much to new music, honestly. I mean, a pop song, if a pop song comes on and I like it, I'll listen to that over and over and over again. And it could be anything. It could be Post Malone, it could be Beyonce, it could be anybody. I mean, good music's good music. And I'll listen to it over and over again, but I don't have any particular artist because I don't follow any particular artists. I'm not waiting for what they have to say, which I think is probably the case with most people, because they're not, then waiting for any revelations from what are the Beatles going to tell us? Artists don't shape people's lives that way. So honestly, I still play. I have a band. I play in jam sessions. I love the blues. So I find myself going back and I go back. What do I listen to? Freddie King, but I listen to ZZ Top because Billy Gibbons is amazing. But that's not new. I mean, that's 80s. But that I just find I'm listening to that because that's the music I like to play. And again, it's just the new pop stuff just doesn't, just do it for me. It's not because I'm older. It's just, I'm just more like musical, I guess,
If you were to give any advice to anyone who is breaking into the music industry itself, or even a musician or a band, do you have any advice for them?
Yes, I actually do, because I'm often asked to talk to, friends of family or young sons and daughters who are, trying to make it in the music business. And what I find fascinating is they all want to know, what's the answer? Is it, TikTok? Is it music videos on YouTube? Is it social media? And I always tell them that they have to look inward at themselves, because you could have a TikTok video that goes spiral and, you could be famous for a few months or a year. But in order to really have a career, you have to be worth tickets. And people have to want to see you live. And so I ask Art, I go, when you play live, do you get a standing ovation? Do you get an encore? Are people like, they can't get enough? And surprisingly, most artists don't even think about that. They look at me like, and I'm going, that's your job. I said, if you look at Rolling Stones and Bruce Springsteen and all these people, they've stayed this big for a reason. They had a work ethic. They figured out how to do this. How do I get an encore? How do I, what songs am I writing? Am I reaching people? I said, because you need to be so good, especially in today's world, that somebody will come to see you on a Friday night in a club rather than stay home and play a video game, watch a movie, go hang out with friends. You're looking for people to go, no, you got to go down and see these people or see you as a solo artist, because they know that what this artist is saying it matters to them so much that it's helping shape their lives. And so I tell people, you go do that. See if you can do that. If you can't do that, chances are you're not going to make it. It's okay. You can still be a musician and have fun, but that's, you need to do that. All the other stuff will come. Yeah, you'll make videos but you need to learn how to entertain and how to write songs that matter. And then the rest of it, will come along. So that, it's sort of like the same speech that I give to a lot of folks, but I believe it, in my heart of hearts. That's the job of being an artist.
It's good advice. I have some really great hidden history followers and online, and I have a couple questions for you. You good with answering a few questions from listeners?
I am totally good with asking a few questions from listeners, yeah.
All right. So the first question is going to be from Bob Reedy of Harrison, New York. He wants to know, what is your favorite Bruce Springsteen tour and why?
I would say that my favorite Bruce Springsteen tour was the Darkness on the Edge of Town tour. And I know that's going back, but the reason that was my favorite was because Bruce was really coming into his own. The Born to Run album had a hit. He was known as the biggest cult artist. He hadn't had a hit record, but he was selling 1 million albums, based on his touring and just how good he was live. And on that tour, they were still playing theaters. And just imagine a couple 3,000 people in the theater just going out of their minds to see a Bruce Springsteen show. And he was still telling stories then. He was a great storyteller. And as years have gone by, he has less time for stories because he's written so many songs. But he would tell just the funniest stories. And he would tell the story, if he was playing a Halloween show, he'd say, yeah, Clarence and I, we visited the graveyard. And when we were in the graveyard, we saw God. And God was playing the drums. And we knew he was God because on the drum head it said G-O-D. It was the first time at Winterland in San Francisco. It was the first time, which has become a habit of his, body surfing. And he puts himself in the crowd and people pass him around.
Whoa.
Like the treasure that he is. First time it happened was in Winterland. He just laid back in the crowd. And before he knew it, the crowd pulled him off the stage and they're passing him around the room.
Wow.
On his back. And so all these things that now are part of his show were organic. Another favorite was during Close to Christmas, again at Winterland, he said, everybody's got lights now. Laser beams are big and everybody's got big light shows. We're kind of like, blue collar, but I finally caved. I was like, I told the guys, we got to have lights. So I'm watching this from the sound booth, right? Just on a riser from where the board is, the soundboard is. And I'm going, oh no, are you kidding me? And he goes, well, here's our lights. Douse the house light. Douse the house lights, guys. So they shut off the lights in the hall. Somebody flicks a switch, and all of a sudden you see Christmas lights wrapped around all the amplifiers.
Oh, funny.
These are our lights. It was fantastic. It was so E Street Band. It was so Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, that's great.
So those are fond memories because once he starts playing bigger and bigger shows, the Born to Run tour was fantastic. Because of that. Mm-hmm. But I like the innocent days when bands are really just starting to take off, and maybe one day we'll talk about Bruce because I got to be a big part of his early career.
Well, Bob Reedy is a huge Bruce Springsteen fan, and so I was happy that he got a question in. And then my next question is a 2-part question from Barb Jordan of Tucson, Arizona. She wants to know, how did Mick Taylor become a Rolling Stone? And what is Mick's dressing room must-haves? What food does he have to have? She says, inquiring minds want to know.
Well, the Mick Taylor story is interesting. It's kind of sad in a way because the other original guitar player, who was a multi-instrumentalist, by the way, was Brian Jones. And when the band became very big, Brian sort of got, amped up on the celebrity, and everybody was into drugs then, but Brian was going a little too far, and he was becoming unreliable. And it was sad because it was his band. The original band, I think, was put together by Brian, but he was unreliable, and the guys were looking at each other going, look, we're all having fun, but when we have a studio rehearsal, we're playing live, this guy's got to show up. And eventually they had to let him go, which was very difficult for them and difficult for Brian. And at the time, there was a band called John Mayall's Blues Breakers, which is a blues band that almost every seminal rock guitar player that we know in England goes through the Blues Breakers, right? Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, Peter Green, all these people. It was sort of, you went through there to get to the next place. And at the time, Mick Taylor, very accomplished guitar player, not just blues, but very jazz oriented, very melodic player, was playing with Mayall, and Mayall recommended to Mick Jagger, he said, you might want to try this guy out. He's just really extra special. So the Stones had him down for a couple of recording sessions, just to see how he'd fit in and see how he would work with Keith, because the Rolling Stones' big secret is how the two guitars work with each other. So, it was how did Brian Jones work with Keith? And then it was how does Mick Taylor intertwine with Keith's guitar playing? He did great. And it also set the Stones off into a different musical path because of the kinds of things he was able to play. Where Keith would play more Chuck Berry kind of rock blues, Mick Taylor, was more melodic. And so he was able to he helped the Stones write some songs that maybe wouldn't have been written, But at any rate, so he was asked. And then there was a show in Hyde Park. It was like a free show. It was a giant show in Hyde Park. And 2 days before that show, Brian Jones actually passed away. I think he passed out in his swimming pool, which was very sad. So the show became kind of a tribute to Brian for Brian. Mick read a poem, and so it was, hey, it's like, hey, Mick Taylor, are you ready? Because we're about to play. And that was his first gig with the Rolling Stones. And so after that, he played with them for a few years and made some incredible music with them. It's my favorite era of the Rolling Stones. The Mick Taylor years I just think those are the best songs. Sticky Fingers, Exile on Main Street. It's wonderful stuff. As far as what Mick Jagger needs in his dressing room, I'm not privy to a must-have like I know Keith has his must-have. I can only tell you that the time, a few times that I would be in close quarters with Mick, he would be surrounded by healthy things. I mean, you would see fruit plates, vegetables, salads. The one time I had a dinner with him, it was Mediterranean diet, salad, fish. And I just remember seeing tons of water. And I just remember looking at all this water bottles going, how could one guy drink this much water? And of course he can't. I mean, it's for people that come into the dressing room, what have you. But my recollection is all very, I don't know what his must-have is, but he's works out, he's healthy. There's a reason why at this age he can still run around the stage like a 20-year-old. I mean, doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say, is that helps him, stay young, stay healthy, stay active. Yeah. I mean, there's another work ethic. I mean, this guy's thinking about the business all the time. They don't be this big and stay this big without a work ethic. Everybody likes to think these bands, they just get high backstage. No. It's a work ethic to remain and who you are and try your best, Well, all of your stories are incredible. I can't wait to get the book. I can't wait for it to come out. I mean, it's been such an honor to have you on my show today and talking about your stories. And it's really, it's going to be great. I can't wait for part 2, part 3, part 4 with you.
It is a lot, but it's nice to share it with people because, it's music that all of us grew up loving. They're my stories, but I just hope that, the people that hear these stories really get a smile out of them because it's all of our music. It's all the music that we embrace. We embrace the music. We embrace these artists. They've been a big part of our lives. So I have fun telling the stories, for that reason. So, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was such a great time, and I look forward to more stories. Thanks for joining me on Hidden History of Rock and Roll. You can find me on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, and Patreon. Become a friend of the show and get your questions answered by our guest. Thanks for listening and have a rockin' day.
We hope you enjoyed the latest installment of the Hidden History of Rock and Roll. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on all the podcast platforms. Thanks for listening to the Hidden History of Rock and Roll with your host, Tiffany Scott.